Hello everyone and welcome to SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guest we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you do subscribe so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted today to be joined once again by Glenn, Richard and Steffen as we move into part 2 of our discussion around the BTP white paper that we've recently released. So I hope you enjoyed listening to the second part of our conversation. So picking up from our last episode and moving back to the BTP white paper, another thing that came through was the skills gap. As a key challenge. What type of skills do you feel, Steffen, or are you seeing that are in highest demand right now when it comes to BTP?
Well, a little bit of everything, right? If you ask me. Well, let me try to make that a little bit more tangible, right? So obviously, general BTP know-how for customers who apply BTP is in high demand. So how do I manage my BTP environment, right? What are best practices in setting up myself organizationally, but then also the account structure and all of these things that you have from an administration perspective. That's where it starts. But then from there, you go then into the very specific domains, right? Like integration skills, if you have an integration project, or application development skills, and on CAP, if you want to, go with the application development stuff on BTP. And so then it goes, let's say, deep into the various areas of BTP. And lastly, something that we actually, and I don't know what's the whether there was a specific trigger, but something that we've seen increase over the past maybe 2 years or so is a much higher demand than also in having security-related knowledge for the BTP projects at our customers, right? And that's also where we try to help our customers and partners building that up. Anything from how can I configure BTP in a secure and safe way, to how do I secure my own application that are built on BTP, which is a completely different beast than securing the BTP services, where we have a responsibility at SAP, right, together with our customers and partners. But then securing the applications on the customer side, that is something where the responsibility then shifts more and more to the customer and to the partner. And that is something where I've seen, let's say, an increase in questions coming in and how to best do that.
Thanks. And Richard, what are you seeing?
The different demand is definitely there. Again, this comes from me, I have an opinion that it's the pace of innovation that's coming through from SAP, and that's a good thing. SAP are innovating incredibly quickly. The technology is changing at a rapid pace. I feel businesses are not keeping up with that, so their current structures are probably still linked in with legacy systems. So you have a basis consultant, you have an ABAP consultant, you have a developer team, you have some functionals. Now, all of those roles will still exist to some extent, but there is not an investment then on this new technology, which is BTP. And the one that is probably most common that I see is, well, we'll just get our basis team to be BTP related. And that sometimes works, but often because of the vastness of BTP and the different services, like Steffen says, it's not possible. So I think there needs to be a push from customers to upskill and find ways in which to do that and dedicate time and resource to be able to do that as well. And I think that's where the biggest challenge for any organization is, because there's only so many hours in a day. People have day jobs. Dedicating time to training, upskilling is lacking. Now, we speak to customers a lot of the time, and we offer kind of a service where we will help run projects alongside customers rather than just do a project for them. That seems to be a preferred approach from a lot of customers, which is good. But again, it takes the initial stages to kind of come through. Again, just to touch on one other thing, it's the culture in the organization as well. I think with BTP, it is an innovative platform. It needs a culture of innovation. So that goes from the top of the organization down to the bottom. Like we just mentioned, being able to run a POC, being able to fail fast, try something. That is a culture that needs to be installed in the organization to allow people to move down this path. So yeah, again, not sure whether that was what you had in mind, Craig, but it's certainly a tall mountain for people to climb.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate that. And Steffen, what I suppose training and certification paths are there available for customers to help them succeed with BTP in the real world, shall we say?
Mm-hmm. So obviously, I would recommend to all the listeners here to check out our Learning Hub and all the different learning journeys and for the individual bits and pieces of BTP. But a couple that I would highly recommend at the beginning, right, for the customers and partners are, number one, obviously the BTP overview, which is one of our most well adopted courses and certifications. But last year we added two specifically to the mix here, two learning journeys and one certification and another one to come this year that I would like to highlight. One is for BTP administrators, because as I said earlier, the demand for best practices and know-how how to run BTP in a professional and not only in an explorative fashion is in high demand. So the BTP administrators course, for which we're going to have a certification later this year, if everything goes according to plan, is something that I would highlight. And the BTP solution architect certification, which we added, I believe, in Q4 last year, is something I would highlight. That has also in very short time gone to one of the most taken courses that we have on the platform, actually, because it really gives you a comprehensive picture of the full platform then from a solution architect perspective, because the solution architects need to have that overview about all the bits and pieces that SAP BTP can bring to the table and how these things interact and how they work together. So solution architecture, BTP administrators is something that I would recommend, in addition to all the special courses that we have for integration, app development, and so on.
Thank you. And how are you approaching it, Glenn, to, if you like, plug that skills gap and upskill your teams?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is covered, right? I think it's partly make sure you build that internal, right, organization. Don't just rely on the external, right, coming in with all that knowledge. They're learning just as much as you do, right, on all these technologies. So make sure you build that internal. It's part investment in training, but training sometimes, of course, very focused on pieces, right? You have to look at the end-to-end platform too. So to your point, right, we have to look at the bigger picture, the solutioning of end-to-end, the architecture. So I think this as Steffen mentioned, lots going on there from training perspective. And then have this frequent, as Richard said, frequent kind of, together, a community of fail fast or trying different things, activate this, see what that does, right? There's a lot of that. It all sounds a bit obvious, but actually, we're all busy and we're all just waiting on day to day and just trying to get stuff done. But building that time for that group, the ones that are working on BTP, to actually have time to actually, that is part of that innovation and learning the platform part, right? To invest in the platform before you actually just start to build on it. So it's a combination of all the things I would say they mentioned. Yes, you need some good training, right, to get started. But not just SAP, right? Use your partners, right? Use your niche partners, use your specialists, right? Training comes from everywhere, right? There's online training, of course, face-to-face, right? There's different ways to, come together as a community, hackathons. So I think, I encourage that. There's not one way of let's say, getting that training going. Start early and use a combination of all the things out there.
I want to advocate sharing. Look, I think SAP do a fantastic job. They share a number of use cases. They share the architectural diagrams. There's a huge knowledge base of almost like solutions that you would most commonly come across. But most organizations will be doing something outside of that. Now, I'm going to shamelessly plug the UKISUG here, but that is by far, that is one of the most beneficial things that customers can get involved in, is speak to each other. What are you doing and learn from each other, share your stories. And I think there's often a hesitation sometimes with certain organizations to publicly speak about their wins and their losses when it comes to developments or progress that they're kind of making. And this is what I like about the UKISUG or any of the SAP user groups around the world, is that you do get certain individuals who are not afraid to kind of speak up. And I would just encourage customers to speak more freely about their solutions, the good and the bad. And you'll be surprised about how many other people in the room will come to you afterwards and say, oh, I was also trying to do the same thing. How did you resolve it? And then you can kind of come together. Anyway, shameless plug, Craig, but I think I would advocate it, definitely.
I certainly appreciate that plug, Richard. Thank you very much. And, as we are building our program for Connect at the moment, get your stories in. Share your stories. Come along. We even give free speaker training. But thank you for that. I mean, what I'm hearing from you all really is find that balance around internal capability and also which also tempers out your reliance on the external partners, but find the balance between the experts that are out there, but also your internal capability. And Steffen, is there anything you would like to add on that at all?
No, I would like to toot the same horn, if that's an expression in English. Because I believe every customer should have at least some knowledge in-house on how to run BTP. Otherwise, partners come in, help you, that's great. But if then all the skills and all the know-how leaves your company again, then you won't be able to operate your solutions on BTP. So at least some skills need to be in-house from my perspective. And again, use the communities, use the partners and everything to build up these skills. And then it is, there's great offerings from our partners and also from SAP to help you with implementing projects and come in and provide know-how and also skills for a certain time, and then you need to find the right mix and match. I believe each customer for themselves, right? But some basic know-how should be there.
Thank you, and I think I completely agree with that, and I hear that because you do need to know the right questions to ask. And unless you have some knowledge, how do you know the right questions to ask to make sure you're getting the most out of yourselves internally, but especially your partners that you're working with? So that I like that. And just moving slightly on now to, I suppose, the commercial side of BTP. The topic of consumption credit and licensing came up quite a few times in the discussions with our members when creating the paper. So Glenn, what are the key things organizations need to be thinking about or know from day one with regards to licensing and consuming credits?
I think day one, right? The customer needs to take the responsibility here, right? Don't assume SAP does it here, right? You have the commercial, it's already hard to, of course, estimate usage. Yes, nice calculators, nice different tools. So you try your best to calculate consumption and credits. But I think it's important from day one, right? Because people will just always activate, right? They don't know the cost of what they're activating. So day one, you have to, as a platform, and you have to make somebody responsible for monitoring, right? Credits, that's what we do. We monitor carefully. We check if something is activated and needed, fine, but that doesn't mean it's going to be needed forever. So it's not just a one-time check. We check all the kind of people. We hold people responsible in that sense, right? And there is some service that really costs peanuts, right? You can have another 100 of those, but there's a few that are really, really chunky, I would say, and they eat up credits really fast. So again, it's good to experiment and do a lot of things. That is part of it. But at the same time, consumption is key here, right? The understanding the model and then how you govern it and check on it. So make somebody responsible, and then I guess really monitor it and make that an ongoing thing. It's not a one-time, once in a year, let's check where we are, and then it's fine. Make that a habit. It should be normal for you as a customer to just monitor your consumption.
Thank you. Richard, anything to add?
I think that was really positive to hear from Glenn as a kind of customer, that they have their eyes on that. We operate BTP for a number of our customers, so we kind of provide that service, but there are a number of customers that we work with that operate their own. And we have, even ourselves as BTP, we have fallen somewhat foul of not getting it right, but because we are monitoring it, we've captured that. So it's not become a problem. So a recent one that we've had is work zone consumption. So work zone can be administered in a couple of different ways. So you can have your user metric, but you can also have the connections metric for external connections. But they are measured in terms of the metric in very different ways. We had that duplicated. So we had every user and all of their connections being charged through. SAP will charge you regardless. So SAP will bill you, that will come off your consumption. And if you were not monitoring it, like Glenn had kind of advised, then you could be 6 months, 8 months down the line. That error just in setup would have cost us in the region of anywhere between £2,000 to £5,000 per month in consumption. That's a huge number. Thankfully, we had our eyes on it. We caught it at the earliest opportunity, and it wasn't as impactful. But I can easily see that some customers could fall foul of that. But yeah, I think the whole, I enjoy the conversation around credits and consumption. I've been speaking about it with customers for a long time. I think it is somewhat deliberately confusing from SAP in terms of a marketing strategy. Sorry, Stefan, on the call, but it's an absolute minefield to get your head around, and especially with the new licensing that's come through for RISE and the new programs there around, you actually have certain entitlements. So you need to consider that. You've got AI units, if I'm getting that one the correct way around. You have entitlements for HANA Cloud in BTP now. You have SAP Build entitlements. So, what is it you're now buying the credits for? Because again, Integration Suite can be consumed from the credits, but also you could assign it on a SKU, same as Business Data Cloud, or for those that are using SAC and DataSphere just now, you could have those in individual SKUs. And again, the name change didn't help last year, going from CPAE to BTPA. Now, I know that they are different, but to customers, that was just an absolute minefield to get their heads around. So I think we've gone through a period of a lot of change in language, terminologies, what it means. It has been very confusing for customers. I'm hoping that given the recent announcements, we have a little bit of a status quo, and that allows customers to kind of get back up to speed and understand it without, significant further changes. So, yeah, I feel for customers. I do. So, but as Glenn says, the calculators, they are there. Do use them, especially if you are doing any new innovations. Then, okay, what have I got activated already? Would I be needing to activate more of the same service? Would I need to activate a new service entirely? What impact does that have? And I think that's sometimes a challenging concept for customers just to kind of branch over, but eventually they will get that.
Thanks. And Steffen, what's your advice to customers really to get to grips with from day one in this regard?
Yeah, man, I thought I'd get around that discussion today, but you're keeping me honest on that one. So it is a topic that we need to look closely at. And first of all, we don't do it by intention, right? We don't want to confuse our customers by intention. So I have to play that back. Here's the thing. So maybe just on how we got where we are right now, right? So there are two ways essentially to license BTP. One is a plain subscription where you have one service, a very clear scenario, and then up to that level that you subscribe to it, you can freely use the service, and that's what also from other SaaS applications. But what we also found is that with a portfolio of BTP growing, there was a higher demand for more flexibility. on the customer side. So we ended up at the pay-per-use model where we have with a formerly CPA, now BTPA contracts. We have that model where you have the cloud credits that we mentioned now a couple of times. And then obviously if you can activate and use the services and we just deduct from your balance, yes, there is a risk of people not knowing what they do, turning on stuff and then costs applying. So there's no way to sugarcoat that. Two things that I want to say to that. Number one, what we've seen successful customers do is really, as Glenn said, from the beginning, have that COE type of function who control, who can activate what and where and how on BTP, right? So I have a very successful consumer products company here in Germany who run a COE of, I believe, 10, 15 people and architects focused on BTP, who then manage the BTP environment for 80 plus developers that they have then also in-house. So it's really a large scale development that this customer does, and they have experts who help the development teams with setting up the right way or the right entitlements on BTP, so the right access to the various services, managing the cost, and also helping with architecture guidance and things like that. So again, it comes back to skills and a little bit of governance also on customer side. At the same time, what we try to do is also put more and more FinOps capabilities into the product. So we have also recently published a blog where we announced actually quite a significant set of features that you're going to get on BTP, which will help you to manage cost, set flags where you get alarms when you approach a certain cost or limit on services. Have some alerting in, simplify the cross-charging that many of our large customers will want to do. If you offer BTP centrally to various lines of business and you want to have some kind of cost allocation, cross-charging type of mechanism. So that's things that we put into the products. But what it all boils down to is be aware of what you activate, understand what you do on the platform. And if you have a function who has the skills and who holds the keys, essentially, that will help you then also manage the costs and not fall into the traps that we mentioned earlier.
Thank you.
We know our community, but we don't know yours yet. Why not share the benefits of your UKISUG membership with those who don't know about us? The UKISUG referral scheme rewards you for helping to grow and develop our community. You can check out the link in the description to find out more about how you can get involved. Terms and conditions apply. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And just Glenn mentioned earlier, and Richard also touched on them, that the tools that are available. So what perhaps are the kind of best ways for customers to estimate the usage early on? Perhaps what tools are available, Steffen?
Mm-hmm. I mean, estimation is the hardest part of the game, I believe, and I don't know if Richard and Glenn will agree here with me, but because you have to know upfront what you'll want to do, how many people or what the usage will likely be, and then how that translates into the metrics of the services that you will consume. So you have to have an understanding from an architecture perspective of which services, what are the metrics, what is driving the consumption, and then you have to have a projection into the future of how your use of your scenario will grow or will be. And then if you have that, and that is the hardest part, I believe, then the rest is just putting numbers into calculators, which we offer to you at the end of the day. But the first part is we cannot take that away from you as SAP, because each and every project is individual, is their own at customers. So unfortunately, there is not that much help that we can give customers here, other than trying to simplify the metrics and all of these things, and maybe work on the packaging that become more to a you get everything that you need anyhow type of consumption of BTP. Or licensing of BTP at the end of the day. But right now, the tooling ex ante, so upfront for estimation, are our calculators on the Discovery Center, and ex post then to manage control, we have tools in the cockpit and also in SAP For Me, which help you stay on top of the costs that occur.
Thank you. And if I just could come back to you, if I may, Richard, because you mentioned obviously how you were keeping an eye on the credit usage that saved you potentially thousands on a monthly basis. So what are the most effective ways do you feel that customers can track and control their credit use?
Well, I think it comes back down to understanding what you've set out to do with BTP. So you have a use case, it's solving a problem that you've had in your organization, you're advancing, you're creating an enhancement to your organization. Based on that, we should have calculated an estimated consumption of BTP. So we know what services as part of that solution when you do kind of your architecture. And then really only at that stage would you kind of really be advancing with your BTP journey, because up until that point you haven't got a use case to have BTP. So I've consumed nothing, now I've got a use case, I'm now predicting that I'm going to consume an element of BTP. And then are you tracking it? So I thought I was going to consume maybe £1,000 worth of consumption by this service, and this service, and it's all broken down on the cockpit. That's the beauty. Are you? And is it to the same values? And if it's not, why is it not? So just asking these very, very simple questions, and I'm sure by the sounds of what Glenn was explaining, that sounds very much like that's the gold standard of kind of how to do it as well. But that's exactly how we do it. Now, we have our own tool that we developed last year. Just the cockpit maybe wasn't as advanced last year and the years previously in terms of what it was able to do. It has advanced, thankfully, so there is a lot more you can do on the standard cockpit, but we had kind of developed our own tool to monitor some of these things for our multiple clients. But we have the breakdown, we have increasing use, we have notifications, etc., that we automate to say, you know, I want to set a threshold that actually I'm expecting the usage of this particular service never to exceed this value by mid-month, and that way I can get an alert and a notification if something was awry. And to the point that I was bringing out earlier, that's exactly what was happening there.
Thanks. And Glenn, anything to add to what you said earlier as well?
Not really. I think we covered it all. I would say, I mean, the big change has happened, to be honest, over the last year, right? When it got better. They released a new report, much more detailed. You can drive down, you can see where the credits go to, right? If you'd asked me a year ago this question, I'd probably really be a lot more frustrated, right? Because we were really struggling at that point, right? With the basic report and not being able to find out services. It's almost a full-time FTE in your team that has to then spend time, right, on how to optimize credits. And the reality is, right, you can always buy more, but you'll never get back, right? If you always need to overbuy, right? That's just how it works. We know that. So it's up to you to kind of do that as optimized as possible. So yeah, I think SAP has got the message, right? They put out the better reporting. So thanks for that, guys. I think that has really helped us out. Still, as a customer, you need to own it, right? But yeah, it's in a much better place than it was.
Yeah, great. And if I could stay with you, Glenn, on just a point around that, and that I suppose is governance. And you know, how important is it to put governance in place from the start? And what does that look like from a BTP environment?
I think that's a good question, right? And governance is always an easy word, right? And then we think it's solved, right? But governance, still, you need to know what needs to be done, right? And why are you governing it, right? What are you trying to achieve with that? I think people sometimes need to understand why, right? As a team, why are we doing this, right? Cost is one thing, but generally efficiency, right? Sustainability is big for us too, right? Why would you run services and other, databases if nobody's using them, for instance, right? So for us as a whole in our program, we look at sustainability, right? We also believe in, let's shut down servers if we're not using them in the weekends, for instance, right? So I think is multiple reasons why governance is key on BTP platform, right? I think of course, there's always a program and a project and that's all good, right? We know we got the experts in. I think governance is also there for the long term, right? End of the day, this has to land in the long term in a BAU world, right? This has to be owned, right, from a BAU perspective. So it's important to not only keep this kind of skills and governance in a program or project, right? It is important that it becomes just normal for an organization to do. So I would say that don't only think about the now, but think about how you want to do governance as a BTP platform, especially in organizations that are new to BTP, right? You have to kind of get the organization ready and to kind of own it in the long term, and it becomes a kind of a shared ownership, and it's not just one person or one small team somewhere. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Richard, anything to add there?
There was a part that Glenn mentioned there that I kind of touched a little bit that I want to expand on. What I have heard from business, and we spoke about this earlier, right? Failing fast, the culture of innovation, those types of sentiments. Now, when it comes to cloud credits, sometimes there's a fine balance, I think, of that governance over the cloud credits, because I had it in the past where we have a large volume of cloud credits available. Let's say for some organizations that can go into the millions, but consumption of that is very little. And yet the innovation project will not get off the ground because the value case of the consumption of credits, which are being paid for, like Glenn mentioned, you can pay for it. Once you subscribe, you're paying for it regardless for the next period. But some organizations have that governance in place that says, actually, still no, because we can't justify that OPEX value, even though the OPEX is already in place. It's interesting that some organizations, and I understand why some of them approach it that way, but it can be a barrier to innovation and to change, and this whole culture of trying to push forward and be agile to the industry. So, I would just make the obvious observation to the audience and just say, let's think smart about this and think with a sensible hat on. If you're already paying for it, if it's a POC, what's the harm? Again, the beauty of the consumption model is very much like Glenn says, you can start, you can also stop. So you can start, you can run the free tiers, you could even run it for 6 months and establish whether or not you have gained the business value to justify the OPEX costs. And then at that point, if you haven't, you could stop it. It's no harm, no foul in that circumstance, I feel. So, let's put our sensible hats on sometimes.
Thank you. And Steffen, anything to add around the governance question or anything Richard mentioned there?
No, not really, because I believe the COE and governance, those two topics, we touched on that already on various areas along our conversation here, right? So whether that's architecture sanity or architecture cleanliness, let's say, or cost management and all of these things, so I believe it's an important part of the adoption.
Perfect. And just if I can, think about organizations now looking to build business cases for BTP in particular and demonstrate value. We've talked about integration. We've talked about that element of automation, etc., extending. Where are you seeing, Steffen, strong return on investment from customers around leveraging BTP for cases like automation, integration, replacing legacy systems?
I believe all across the board, right? So give you an example for integration. We have Harrods in London, right, who went from PIPO on-premise to the integration suite, and then basically they saw a 40% reduction in TCO across the integration landscape, just with license costs, operations costs, and all of these things. So you can build a very good case for an integration use, let's say. Or if we look at the database HANA Cloud, we recently had an IDC study published where we saw some customers cut a third of their 3-year TCO by moving from on-premise to cloud. That's more lift and shift kind of thing. And where I find individual business cases often being easier to create is in all the spaces around process optimization and process automation that we mentioned earlier, because that is where you can then easily measure how much time you're saving yourselves or your workforce, right, by doing something not manually but just in an automated fashion. And then you can calculate how many man hours, women hours, worker hours that saves you per week, per month, per year then. So if you allow me one more customer examples here, we had the German Federal Foreign Office who are automating some of their citizen communication processes using their development on BTP. And what they are meanwhile achieving is half of the inquiries coming in from various citizens across the globe to the Federal Foreign Office. Half of the cases are being responded to without human interaction anymore, because it's just, always the same questions, which you can automate the response process. And they saw also an increase in or a shortening of the time to response, right? So they have, I believe the number is 77, so roughly 3/4 of their inquiries closed the same day, which they didn't have before. So that is cases where we see processes being simplified, being automated, being digitized. And there it is simpler maybe than in other cases, than in more complicated cases to calculate an ROI, I believe.
Thank you. And Richard, any other examples to add from your side?
Yeah, there's countless, but I would say one of the common ones is mobile, bringing things to mobile ability. So especially around warehouses and those types of examples, but external portals as well. So we had a customer present a couple of weeks ago, so auto glass, essentially. We did one very, very simple application which had an element of automation, but it provided an external link to be able to produce their sales orders. Really simple, repeatable use case, and that process had previously been taking the time of 3 people. So, I mean, we didn't expect that sort of kind of result. We weren't, I suppose, necessarily aware of just how encumbered the actual the process was, but yeah, it's phenomenal to kind of see that. Again, warehouse stuff. We're working with a supplier out in France just now on their warehouse processes. A number of applications, everything from connecting those applications into the trucks, into handheld devices, into scanners, managing things from their goods receipt through to their invoice process. It's phenomenal how connected all of that can be. And the power of that extends because now they have the reporting capability. Once that data is there, it's in the SAP system, it's real time because it's happening there and then. They have access to that data. That provides them insights. Insights allows them to be more agile. So the business value continues to increase and expand. That's what I do love about the creativity you can present to BTP.
Thank you. And as we come towards a close now, I'd just like to ask, and I'd like to start with you, Glenn, if I can, on this final question, is what advice would you give to someone who's perhaps just starting to explore BTP or planning to use or looking to build a business case? Where should they begin?
Good job. Where we start? I would say start with a clear business problem, right? Don't just start generally where go in blank and look, where should we start? There's too much services in there, too much capabilities almost, right? That's almost BTP's own created problem, right? It is a platform of everything, right? But start with a clear problem, right? A business problem, right? There's definitely a technology in there, but business problem, and then understand the services that come with that, right? How can you look at it? But don't, again, try to solve it yourself, right? Look out there, right? Go to events, work with partners, right? Do your research, right? There's a big communities out there solving the similar problems, right? So make sure you use, I would say, the bigger BTP community out there and all the knowledge, right? And there's, of course, a lot of chat GPTs out there that can even give you advice these days. So look at it from that perspective, right? Really look at it from how can BTP help my business, right? It's not just a toy, right? There's a lot of good stuff in there, but address it in that way. I would say that's really my starting point, and then don't try to solve it alone, right? Use the community.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Glenn has shared there. One of the things that I've been very aware of over the last couple of years is there are a lot of customers who have jumped into a BTP journey where they have committed to spend a BTP but with no use case. So just like Glenn said, have a use case for it. That is where success will be driven from. I think some customers have fallen into the trap of having BTP added to a bill of material where actually the topic of the conversation is whether it be RISE or some other area, or it's a negotiation around transferring legacy licensable objects into like a cloud-based, and BTP seems like an easy option. But if you have it, use it. You know, again, what I said earlier, if you're spending the money, make sure you're actually gaining the value out of it. I think the stats that we were kind of shared a couple of years ago is you should be receiving at least a 5 times return on investment of any BTP investment. And the stats that I was looking at last year in 2024 was in the UK, and actually this was similar across EMEA as well. Only 40% of cloud credits that were purchased are actually being utilized. That's a huge number, and I know specific customers who are using almost 0% and are committed to a very large spend over a very long period of time. So if you're spending the money, be aware of your bill of material, be aware that you already have purchased BTP, make use of it, get started, do some POCs, don't be afraid to get stuck in.
Thank you. And the final words to you, Steffen.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I wanted to check with Glenn whether I can use you then maybe as a future marketing slogan for BTP. You said SAP BTP. There's a lot of good stuff in there, so I like that. Maybe we'd use that as a tagline moving forward. So thanks for the kind words. I would again agree to what both you, Glenn, and Richard said, right? So definitely the use case is the driving force, right? And that also, whenever I talk to my customers, and usually I talk to the SAP department or the IT department, I basically say, make sure that you have the business folks at the table when you do the first POCs and the first ideation, because only then you will get relevant and real value business or cases then that you can implement on BTP. That's for me the bread and butter of it all. Make sure that IT and the business go hand in hand, work with a skilled partner or with SAP in the beginning, right, until you have the skills yourselves to do that, and make sure that the first POCs are maybe not the solve it all big complicated cases, but start with a couple of simple ones, right? Automate some processes which are cumbersome, which are email-based, which are spreadsheet-based, which have document type of processes in there where you have to read information from one document and then put it in some different system, and try to make the case and also gain experience by implementing and digitizing these simple processes, and then scale from there. That would be my recommendation to the customers.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you all. Glenn, Richard, Steffen, thank you very much for your time and insights today. And one of the things I picked up from the conversation that I really like is the cycle. You know, we talked about challenges, we've talked about previous issues, but we've also talked about feeding back to SAP and improvement you've all seen over the past 12 months. That cycle of kind of release, feedback, improvement that continues shows that there is a positive future for all of this, and it will get better and better. And, you know, thank you for that and for highlighting that. And, you know, it does show that one of the things we work with SAP on is influence and activity, and customer feedback, partner feedback is so important, because SAP does listen and then implement these changes to make it better for everyone. And seeing that through this conversation is great for me, and I think hopefully good for our listeners too. So, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. Remember, if you want to download the paper, please visit sapusers.org and it will be available on the website. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep smiling.